The movie starts by showing a small abandoned warehouse. A female Labrador lies hidden with her litter until she is found by animal control, who decide to take the mother and her puppies to the shelter. But the employees accidentally leave one of the puppies behind. Alone and hungry, the little red-coated dog decides to leave the shed and starts looking for food. But when he approaches a hot dog stand, he is chased away by the owner and runs into the middle of the street, almost getting hit several times. After almost being run over, the reddish dog finds a group of feeding pigeons and begins to imitate them. But while fighting with one of the birds for food, he catches the attention of Bridwell, a mysterious old man who decides to take him to his animal rescue tent. A young girl named Emily goes to her new school, where she starts getting bullied by Florence and her group of friends, who start making fun of her for being a scholarship student. It turns out that the school where Emily studies is one of the most expensive in the country, but because she has good grades, she gets a place to study for free, even though she is extremely poor. After school, the young girl goes home where she finds out that her mother, Maggie, will have to go to the other side of the country for work, but since she can't afford to hire a nanny, she calls Uncle Casey to take care of her daughter, an adult who is not very responsible and besides not being able to get a job, lives inside a mini truck. After his sister leaves on her trip, Casey is taking his niece to school when she finds Bridwell's tent on the school grounds, piquing the girl's interest to enter. Even though he thinks this is a terrible idea, the uncle eventually gives in to Emily's requests and they enter the shelter, where they find Bridwell and his various exotic animals. As soon as he sees the visitors, the outgoing old man begins to tour the place and introduces them to the Crimson Labrador, the shelter's newest resident. When she sees the little dog, Emily falls in love instantly and asks to take him home, but already imagining that his sister would not like this idea at all. Casey refuses the request and returns the animal to Mr. Bridwell. Still thinking about the radioactive puppy, Emily goes to school where Florence and her friends begin to humiliate her for collecting cans for charity work. So the students usually only make a check, but since she is poor, Emily had to do the collecting with her own hands, giving the girls a chance to make fun of her. Seeing what Florence is saying, little Owen approaches her to try to comfort her, while he helps carry the cans to class. But as Emily is walking to the teacher's desk, the bag tears open and the girl is forced to pick up the recyclables while the whole class laughs. After class, the girl goes home and starts searching the internet about Bridwell's animal rescue. For some reason, she can't find any results on Google. While she is fiddling with her notebook, the backpack starts to move on its own and Emily slowly approaches it, afraid of what might be inside. But to her surprise, she ends up finding the hidden Labrador puppy. Even though she is confused, the girl takes him to bed and starts suggesting names while the dog reacts negatively to every option, but decides to name him Clifford after noticing his excitement at hearing this name. After the baptism, Emily realizes that her new companion is hungry and decides to give him some potato chips. But while she is getting the snacks, Clifford steals one of her slippers and takes it to the kitchen, right where Uncle Casey is preparing the snack. While the man is assembling his sandwich, the pet climbs onto the table and steals one of the turkey breast slices, but is caught in the middle of the theft. As soon as she sees Clifford, Casey accuses his niece of having taken the dog without his permission and says that they need to return it to the tent. But since they are in the middle of a storm, the man decides to let the girl keep the dog until the next morning. During the night, Emily cries with Clifford on her lap while saying that if they were big, they wouldn't have any more trouble. But somehow, her tears awaken some kind of magic that makes the cub grow overnight, only stopping after it passes 10 feet tall. When she wakes up the next morning, the girl is startled to realize that her wish has come true and Clifford is a colossal size. But her reaction gets the pet agitated, causing him to break her bed and shred her pillow. Not knowing what to do, the girl leaves Clifford in the room and runs to her uncle's room looking for help. But before he even hears what she says, Casey realizes that they are late for school and starts desperately getting ready. While getting dressed, the man says that he has been thinking about the puppy all night and that he will allow her to keep the pet until Maggie returns, but Clifford suddenly appears inside the room, giving Casey an absurd scare. Seeing her uncle's despair, Emily explains that it is the same dog as before and suggests that something may have happened during the night. Casey gives the command for Clifford to sit, but due to his gigantic size, the Labrador ends up smashing the dining table with his buttocks. Furious, the uncle starts searching for Bridwell's address while Clifford drinks water from the toilet, but just like his niece, he also can't find anything about the animal tent on Google. To make matters worse, while they think about what to do, the building's janitor, Mr. Packard, knocks on the door asking to fix the dishwasher Maggie had ordered, but knowing they will be evicted if they find out about the radioactive Labrador, Emily hides Clifford in the bedroom while Casey tries to get the employee to leave. Due to his bad mood, Mr. Packard says he will do the job now and enters the apartment uninvited, bumping into the broken table. To try to fool him, Casey invents that he is doing a renovation and the man ignores it, deciding to continue his work. But to their misfortune, the building's hydraulic registers are always in the bedroom, meaning that he will need to go in to do the maintenance. To prevent the janitor from finding Clifford, Casey offers to do the favor and enters his niece's room while she takes Mr. Packard to look for the defective pipe, but the Labrador senses her presence and becomes extremely agitated, wagging his tail from side to side uncontrollably, causing Mr. Packard to hear the sound of the thuds. Curious, the janitor starts walking towards the noise to investigate, but Emily's uncle manages to close the register and leave the room at the last second. Even though he finds it all very strange, the janitor decides to focus on his work and goes under the sink. But while he is crouching down watching the plumbing, Clifford somehow manages to get out of the room and starts sniffing the janitor's buttocks. Desperate, Emily takes the dog to her mother's room while Casey stays by Mr. Packard's side. But at this point, he is so uncomfortable with this bizarre situation that he decides to just leave, promising to come back later with a piece he forgot. After the janitor leaves, Emily releases the Labrador and Casey begins to think of ways to find Bridwell. But the girl argues that they can't abandon the dog at that size and says they need to seek veterinary help before Clifford gets even bigger. Thinking how bad it would be, Casey decides to accept and takes the dog to his truck. But while they are boarding, Owen shows up to hand in his homework and Clifford ends up drooling on his head, scaring the boy so badly that he even falls to the ground. When they hear Owen scream, the people around finally realize the size of the mutant dog and start taking pictures of him, but Emily doesn't seem to mind and tells them that they are going to the vet, causing the boy to ask to go along. Clifford picks up Owen and puts him beside him in the truck, but at that moment, he looks in the direction of the park and sees a man in a giant hamster ball, activating his hunting instinct that causes the dog to run like crazy after the sphere. Unaware that there is a person in there, Clifford starts playing with the ball and throws it against a tree, causing the human to hit the trunk face on, but not satisfied. He still punctures the object and starts dragging the man inside the bubble through the park. The people around started to make even more videos and pictures for Instagram, causing the mutant puppy to go viral on all social networks. At the same time, Zach Turin, owner of a company trying to develop giant foods, is inspecting the progress of the research when he discovers that even with his $400 million investment, his team has not made any considerable progress. Disgusted, the businessman is arguing with his chief scientist when his secretary arouses the millionaire's interest in finding out what caused the Labrador to grow so that he can also use them in his food. Thinking of gaining possession of the animal for testing purposes, Zach asks his employees to track it down while he prepares an identification chip to inject into Clifford. The man plans to say that the Labrador was owned by Life Grow, that he ran away from the lab using the chip to prove that the dog belonged to them. While Zach finishes explaining the plan to his secretary, another of his employees looks at the pictures of the animal and realizes that Emily appears in most of them. Analyzing the images a little more, he sees the school crest on the girl's uniform, figuring out exactly where to find it. Checking the data, Zach and his team manage to locate Emily's address and decide to bribe Mr. Packard to get more information. But upon seeing the pictures of Casey with Clifford, the janitor discovers why they are acting strangely and decides to take action about it. On the other side of town, Clifford finally arrives at the clinic, but since he has never seen a dog that size, the vet has no idea what to do. To have something to put on his clipboard, the doctor suggests checking his weight and taking his temperature, but because of his colossal size, this is practically impossible. Just analyzing the Labrador's appearance, the vet says that he seems perfectly healthy and that he has no idea what might have caused the transformation, asking them to return to the reception while he deepens his analysis. At the entrance, the clerk says she has never seen any dog that size, and Emily reveals that until yesterday he was a normal size, but since she has worked in this business for decades, the clerk immediately suggests that she picked up Clifford from Bridwell's tent. When they realize that the clerk knows the mysterious old man, Emily and Casey start asking her questions, but despite knowing Bridwell, the woman says that it is impossible to find him and that he only appears when necessary. At this point, Emily remembers that the tent of rescued animals was on the school grounds and would need to register his data on the school's computer. Therefore, the only thing they need to do is to access the institution's internal network and find out everything they want about Bridwell. To do this, Casey breaks into the school and manages to trick the secretary into leaving her post, leaving the main computer available for Owen to copy the data onto his USB stick. While they are doing this, Emily goes to the cafeteria and starts getting dozens of hot dogs to feed Clifford. But when she sees the amount of food her classmate is taking, saying that if she is going hungry, the class can put together a food basket to help. With no time to waste, Emily just ignores it and continues assembling the hot dogs, but as she tries to put on the condiments, the ketchup bottle ends up splattering just as Florence is passing it around, completely dirtying the girl's shirt. Furious, the group leader begins to corner Emily while trying to humiliate her even more, but at that moment, Clifford manages to break free from the truck and follows the girl's trail to the cafeteria. arriving just in time to encourage his tutor to confront Florence. Still, Emily prefers to avoid a fight and tries to leave, but it's too late. As soon as Clifford enters the cafeteria, everyone focuses their attention on him, which makes Florence extremely upset, causing her to call the Labrador a freak. Furious, Emily finally takes a stand and decides to defend her partner, saying that Florence is just a needy, spoiled brat who wants attention at any cost, making everyone laugh. After getting their change back, the group goes home where they plan to plug Owen's flash drive into their notebook and find out Bridwell's address. But when they get to the apartment, they see an eviction notice from Mr. Packard on the door right next to a picture of Clifford with Emily and Casey. Unaware of what has happened, Owen stands in the street giving water to the Labrador, until one of his neighbors has an accident and ends up hanging from an antenna at the top of the building. As soon as he sees the man in need of help, Clifford doesn't think twice and gets out of the truck, running towards the crowd and catching his neighbor at the last second, saving his life and becoming the hero of the neighborhood. At this point, Emily and Casey come down from the apartment and return the flash drive to Owen, but instead of telling him about the eviction order, they just say that they were locked out. To solve this problem, the boy goes to a neighboring store and borrows the notebook, managing to access the files and discovers that Bridwell will be at the county hospital the next day, but Casey is feeling guilty for getting his sister evicted and refuses to continue on the journey, saying they must deliver Clifford to a shelter. At this point, Zach finally finds Emily and puts his plan into action, introducing himself as Clifford's owner and saying that the giant dog escaped after one of his janitors left the door open. Going along with the strategy, the millionaire says he is sorry for the inconvenience his Labrador has caused and offers a sum of money as a way to compensate them, but the girl refuses to let her uncle take the money. Seeing this as an opportunity to solve everything, Casey calls his niece to talk and says that this is the end of her problems because besides returning Clifford, the money would be enough to bribe Packard and be able to return home. However, while thinking about the situation, the girl realizes that the businessman implied that Clifford was already a giant when he escaped from the lab, which is not true. But when he realizes that he has been found out, he orders his scientists to inject the chip into the dog while everyone is distracted. Hearing her pet's cry of pain, the girl gives the command for him to run as Zach's men pursue them. With the help of the neighbors, Clifford manages to gain distance and runs straight to the truck along with Owen and Emily, but Casey and some other residents stay behind to slow down the security guards. Even unarmed, the civilians build a barricade to delay their pursuers, but they still manage to catch up with them on the other side, forcing them into a confrontation, where the villagers use the grocery stores produced to knock out Zach's men. At the same time, Emily arrives in the truck and decides to drive on her own to save Clifford, but she drives completely out of control and almost runs over the security guards while driving backward. Even so, Zach's men do not give up on capturing the dog and begin to chase the trio in the truck, but when he realizes that they are approaching the center, Owen starts to guide the girl until they lose the pursuers in the garage of the building where he lives. On the other side of the country, Maggie gets a call from the principal that her daughter didn't go to class, and extremely worried, the woman calls her brother who tries to convince her that everything is fine, but Owen's pug arrives on the scene and starts barking at Clifford, causing Maggie to hear the dog sound. In an attempt to disguise it, Casey says that it is the machine that is still defective and tries to reel it in a little more, but when he sees that the pug has been accidentally swallowed by Clifford, he has to interrupt the call once and for all to help him get free. After he fails to capture the giant dog, Zach decides to go to the police station and tells the police chief the same story, saying that if they can't return Clifford to his lab, his mutation may spread across species, causing cockroaches and rats as big as the Labrador to appear. Convinced by the businessman, the policeman decides to call a press conference where he offers a reward for information that leads to Clifford's whereabouts. But before Casey and Emily can think of anything to get away with, Owen's father comes home and decides to help them, offering one of his cargo ships to take the Labrador to his private reserve in Shanghai, China. Even though it is the safest option, Emily refuses to let her dog go that far away and Casey tries to convince her that it is the best option. But the girl asks for one last chance to find Bridwell and bring the dog back to its original size. Touched by his niece's feelings, Casey accepts and they drive to the hospital the next morning, leaving Owen in the truck with Clifford. But while waiting for his uncle and niece to return, the mutant Labrador releases a radioactive gas that forces the boy to open the door to breathe. A bad idea, because as soon as they see the dog on the news, people start taking pictures and calling the police. Unaware of what is happening outside, Emily enters the hospital and sees Bridwell's tie being carried in a box. A patient says that the owner of the object died in the morning and asks for Casey's number to send the funeral information. In shock, the girl hugs her uncle and begins to grieve that her last hope has gone down the drain, but they have to leave their grief for later because the policemen have already arrived at the hospital. With no other alternative, Casey drives toward the port and Emily begins to say goodbye to her beloved puppy before he leaves for Shanghai. But after Clifford leaves on the ship, the Coast Guard eventually finds him on the freighter and takes him straight to Life Grow headquarters. When they find out about the dog rescue, the press immediately starts covering the case on every possible channel, causing Maggie to finally find out what is happening to Emily. As soon as she sees her daughter's name on television next to a giant dog, the woman decides to drop everything and return to her daughter immediately, but not before sending dozens of messages to her younger brother, cursing him by every possible name. From his truck, Casey is doing errands when he realizes that he has received the invitation to Bridwell's wake, but upon opening the file, he realizes that the deceased looks nothing like the old man in the tent. This caused the uncle and niece to conclude that the patient must have mistaken the owner of the tie. Happy that they still have a chance, they begin to celebrate Clifford's possible cure, not realizing that he is already with Life Row. Owen comes up to them and tells them that he has found Bridwell's tent in the park near the bridge, but before they can head there, one of the neighbors alerts them to the report regarding Clifford's apprehension. As soon as they discover that the dog has been taken to Zach's company, the whole neighborhood decides to join the girl in the rescue mission, devising a plan to invade Life Row and recover the mutant dog. While Zach is holding a press conference, Emily's group manages to cut through the protective fence and enter the company grounds, but since they need a distraction, they decide a couple of lawyers from the neighborhood decide to break into the press conference and ask questions about lawsuits the businessman has received. Taking advantage of the breach, the rest of the group goes to the back, where they try to break the door down in every possible way, but realizing that this will not work, one of them decides to throw some smoke bombs on the floor, activating the fire alarm and automatically unlocking all the emergency exits. In this way, they manage to break into Life Grow's laboratory and reach Clifford, where one of the security guards tries to paralyze them with an electric shock, but luckily, one of the neighbors has a plastic prosthesis that does not conduct electricity, opening the breach for his partner to knock out the employee with a single punch. After taking out the security guards, Casey sends the scientists outside and Emily goes straight to Clifford, who is extremely excited to see them again. After she misses them, the girl decides to ride the dog and head for Bridwell's tent in the park. But Zach doesn't give up and starts chasing them, accompanied by his security guards and police cars. Clifford runs across town while dozens of cars follow behind them, but just as they are about to reach the bridge, the red Labrador enters a traffic jam street and manages to lose his pursuers by jumping over the stopped vehicles. Now free, the pair arrive at the park and finally meet Bridwell again. Desperate, Emily asks the old man to make Clifford return to his normal size, and he replies that love made him so big that all she has to do is keep loving him and the dog will be fine. At this moment, the police chief arrives accompanied by some officers and asks Emily to stay away, but the girl refuses to let Clifford be taken away and starts making a speech in the crowd, saying that despite his abnormal size, he is completely harmless. As soon as she says this, Maggie arrives on the scene and starts yelling for her daughter to come to her, but Emily stands her ground, saying that Clifford is special and has helped many people, asking the cops to let her stay with her partner. At this point, Zach appears in the crowd and says that the girl can't have something that belongs to his company, but when he sees that the crowd begins to boo him, the man decides to go to the final stage of his plan, saying that when Clifford was born, a microchip was implanted in his body. To prove this, he takes a scanner and asks the police chief to scan the integrated circuitry in the dog's neck. However, when the man passes the scanner, the device points out that both the chip and Clifford are Emily's property. Not understanding anything, the girl looks to Bridwell for an answer, but the little man just says that technology can be magic and says goodbye, disappearing into the crowd. With all the problems solved, everyone comes together to celebrate the girl's victory, including Maggie, who, despite being furious, decides to forgive them both and adopt Clifford. To record this moment, Owen asks everyone to gather for a photo, but when Casey rides Clifford at the boys' request, the dog sees two people in the hamster balls and decides to chase them, taking the man on his back. In the end, Maggie got her apartment back and Uncle Casey became a responsible adult, got his dream job, and was the pride of the family. What do you think of this recap? Please drop all your thoughts in the comments section below. One like from you and maybe subscribing would be great support for us. And that's it for now. See you in the next videos.